Commander Kavarn stood on the shimmering glass-like floor of the Elysian Dawn's command deck, every fiber of his being attuned to the star-speckled void beyond the expansive viewport. The Sol system lay spread out before him like a cosmic web. Mars's dusty red plains, the glint of lunar ice, and the glittering ribbon of the asteroid belt, all bathed in the distant warmth of Sol's pale light. There, almost motionless against the backdrop of space, was the telltale silhouette of a human battleship, HMS Dauntless. He glanced at the tactical display hovering between he and Lieutenant Sarah. Tiny golden pips danced across the hologram, indicating the battleship's orientation and relative movement or lack thereof. The Androvian Union had cataloged dozens of human warships over the decades, cruisers, frigates, even carriers, but never had they encountered one of these juggernaut-class vessels so close to home. Intelligence officers called it anomalous, a descriptor Kavarn now realized was woefully insufficient. "Commander," Sarah said, sealing the final command sequence. Her voice, usually as steady as a mountain spring, carried a subtle tension. "Stand by. Initiating long-range scan in T-5 seconds." Kavarn inclined his head. "Proceed." His gaze never left the vessel. He felt that faint, electric thrill, curiosity mingled with dread coursing through him. It was one thing to know humanity possessed terrible firepower, another entirely to see it loom before you. On Sarah's console, strands of data poured into existence: spectral readings, hull composition analysis, energy signature breakdowns, and then the scan locked onto the battleship's aft section, focusing on the heart of Dauntless, the power core. The holo expanded, revealing layer upon layer of nacelles and conduits, of heat sinks and crystalline capacitors. At first glance, the Androvians saw the expected: massive reactor banks, efficient thermal radiators, reinforced bulkheads. But as the scan intensified, Sarah's brow furrowed in confusion. "Commander," she said quietly, I'm seeing an energy matrix here I can't identify." She zoomed in. "Quantum resonance field, maybe? But output levels are off the charts." Kavarn moved closer. "Explain." Sarah took a breath, fingers dancing over the holo console. "It appears to be a self-sustaining quantum cascade reactor. It's cycling subatomic particles through a closed-loop system that generates near-limitless power. Our databases show these reactors as theoretical, never realized in practice. Yet here it is, fully operational." Admiral Thal, seated quietly, at the far side of the deck until now, rose slowly. His silvered beard and deep-set eyes gave him an almost patriarchal presence. "Our sensors are also detecting a secondary field," he announced, voice low. "Electrophasic oscillators running along the hull plating. They're modulating at terahertz frequencies, actively masking certain energy signatures from our long-range arrays." A murmur ran through the bridge crew. Kavarn's mind raced. Humans had always been clever engineers, but this level of stealth defied Androvian sensor technology. He pressed his palm against the holo screen. "So even if we can see the Dauntless, we might not be seeing everything?" Thal nodded grimly. "Additionally, there's a gravitational wave signature, Commander. They're emitting focused gravitational pulses. That implies graviton-based weaponry, something we never thought humans had mastered." Sarah's holo toggled between cross-sections of the Dauntless's weapon turrets and auxiliary power nodes. "Look at these emitter arrays," she said. "They're clustered around the nacelles. If they're graviton projectors, they could collapse matter at a quantum level, disassemble hull plating, disrupt molecular bonds. The range could be hundreds of kilometers." A hush fell. The star field beyond the viewport blinked innocently, unaware of the cataclysmic potential parked in its midst. Kavarn felt his throat tighten. "And their shields?" he asked, already fearing the answer. Sarah overlaid the shield matrix projections. Streams of yellow and white danced across the battleship's hull. "Adaptive particle shields, Commander. They absorb incoming energy, convert it back into usable power. At the same time, micro-layered nanoalloys in the hull can reroute kinetic impacts, bullets, plasma bolts, along vector lines that reinforce the ship's structural integrity." Kavarn's gaze flicked to the tactical officers, each absorbed. in recalibrating threat assessments. So our disruptor beams, our best weapon, would barely scratch them. Thal's lips curled grimly. Barely. They could likely push those pulses back at us, amplified through their resonance converters. Every breath felt like ice in Kavarn's lungs. Humanity's technological edge, always a subject of Androvian pride and paranoia, now towered over them like an insurmountable mountain. The enormity of their strategic disadvantage settled like a black weight on his chest. Sarah tapped another sequence. Commander, projections indicate the Dauntless has at least 3 graviton pulses ready to fire. Each one, if fully charged, could devastate a cruiser in seconds. At point-blank range, it's equivalent to a small nova. Kavarn turned to Admiral Thol. Why is this ship here, unaccompanied? No escorts, no fleet support. Thal's gaze drifted toward the viewport. Perhaps they didn't expect an Androvian presence, or they believe our forces have been pushed too far to investigate. Either way, they're playing with fire. He froze as the battleship's external shields flared into a sapphire blue glow, an instantaneous, almost reflexive reaction. They've detected our scans, he muttered. Across the command deck, consoles overloaded. Data relays sparked, sensors spat out error messages. The Dauntless had triggered an active countermeasure, a tachyon flux burst that lashed out at anything probing. Its hull, serrated waves rolled into the Elysian Dawn's sensor grid, frying subroutines and corrupting data feeds. Damn it. Sarah slammed her fist on the console. Our sensors are frying, complete outage in subspace bands. Commander Kavarni gripped the back of her chair. Shields up, raise all defensive matrices, evasive maneuvers, maximum warp vectors. The deck shuddered as the bridge crew raced to seal bulkheads and reroute power from auxiliary generators. The entire ship hummed with tension, power conduits thrumming, hull plating groaning. Outside, the Elysian Dawn slipped into hyperspace. Stars bled into streaks of white and blue. The universe collapsed into a pinprick of light. Even through the brood of FTL distortion, Kavarn could see the Dauntless tilt its bow as if tracking them. He dared not watch longer. As warp engines roared, he dropped into a command chair, wiping sweat from his brow. The entire crew wore pale, frightened expressions. Lieutenant Sarah collapsed against her console, breathing heavily. Admiral Thol sat silent, eyes fixed on the holo where every detail of the Dauntless had already been cached, enough to trigger nightmares in Androvian halls of war. Status? Kavarn asked in a hoarse voice. Shields at 56%, reported the tactical officer. We're clear of the pulse, but our sensor array is charred. We've lost long-range scanning capability. Sarah lifted her head, shoulders heaving. Commander, the Dauntless's stealth systems are more advanced than we expected. They're funneling emissions through planetary magnetospheres, Mars specifically, to cloak critical signatures. They could hide entire fleets that way. Kavarn leaned back, jaw clenched. And we've seen only one. How many more juggernauts are stationed at Earth or Luna? The tactical officer hesitated. Our intel suggests at least 2 more battleships, Invincible and Vanguard, but their exact configurations are unconfirmed. We've never scanned them at this resolution. Silence enveloped the bridge. The hum of the reactors and the distant hiss of the cosmic wind on the hull were the only sounds. Kavarn stared out into the void, contemplating the precarious position of the Androvian Union. For centuries, they had expanded their borders, repelled adversaries through superior tactics and cunning weaponry, disruptor arrays, plasma mines, planetary siege cannons. And yet here they were, staring down the barrel of human technology that made their marvels seem archaic. Admiral Thol finally broke the silence. I'm sending an encrypted distress signal to High Command. They need every scrap of data we can provide. If the humans realize we were scanning, they may retaliate before we can regroup. Kavarn nodded. Agreed. And order all retrofit teams to prioritize reverse engineering whatever we can salvage from these scans. We need a countermeasure, even if it's crude. Sarah closed her eyes for a moment, then reopened them, grim determination blazing. Commander, once we're out of range, I'll start filtering the damaged data through redundancy matrices. We might restore partial scan results. Kavarn's gaze returned to the hollow of the Dauntless, stored like a forbidden relic. Do it, he said. Our scientists will need every bite. As the Elysian dawn pushed deeper into uncharted, FTL currents leaving the Sol system behind, Kavarn allowed himself a brief, unguarded breath. He had led his crew into the teeth of a threat they barely understood, and though they fled, they carried home a knowledge that would haunt them. Humans had weaponized graviton fields and built ships to wield them. In the hushed corridors of the cruiser, the crew whispered through hushed conversations. Stories of crewmen who had once argued that humans were bluffing, that their reputation was all show. Now they had seen the truth. A weapon capable of tearing molecular bonds as casually as a child plucks a flower. And he couldn't shake the dread that if the Dauntless's prime sequence hadn't been interrupted by their scan, the Elysian dawn would now be drifting, an effortless pile of atoms lost somewhere between Mars and Earth. Kavarn steeled himself. The Androvian Union would respond. They had to. Yet as he watched the stars shift outside the viewport, he felt a hollow certainty settle deep in his chest. When they returned, their war against humanity would be something unlike any conflict they'd ever faced. And after what he had seen, he wished the Dauntless had remained just another blip on the sensor array, unexamined, uninterpreted, a distant rumor, rather than the nightmare he now carried in his mind. Commander Kavarn's footsteps echoed in the vast, angular corridor of Oberon Station's central chamber as he made his way toward the High Council's deliberation hall. Beneath his uniform, his left arm throbbed from the burn wound he'd sustained aboard HMS Defiant. Lieutenant Sarah's condition weighed on him more heavily than his own injuries. News from the medical bay had been grim. He steeled himself, both for the Council's scrutiny and the knowledge of all he had witnessed in the past 17 days. The Dauntless's terrifying power, the Defiant's explosive destruction, and the faces of the 62 crewmen who never returned. Outside the chamber, sentries in cobalt uniforms stood at rigid attention. Kavarn nodded to them as he passed, managing a tight-lipped acknowledgement. He sensed their tension. Rumors of a human battleship's capability had spread, like wildfire, breeding fear among every officer, engineer, and technician on Oberon. The station itself orbited Tau Ceti I-4, a cold, rocky world with a thin atmosphere, its barren landscape serving as a reminder that, here at the fringes of Androvian space, survival depended on vigilance. Inside the council hall, the elders, Elder, Inara, High Counselor Raven, and 2 strategic analysts floated their holoforms just above the dais. Behind them, a panoramic viewport revealed the turquoise shimmer of Tau Ceti's upper cloud layer, actively mined by Androvian operations. When Kavarn bowed and approached, the elders' faces bore expressions of concern and expectation. Commander Kavarn, High Counselor Raven began, voice grave. Welcome. We have received preliminary reports of Project Eclipse. The operation's outcome is now our foremost priority. Kavarn straightened. My deepest regrets, High Counselor. We lost Lieutenant Sarah and 41 others in securing the Defiant's reactor schematics. Though the mission succeeded, the human vessel's destruction was catastrophic, and we still have much to learn. Elder Inara's eyes glistened. Your sacrifice will not go unnoticed, Commander. But what have you recovered? Can Androvia now hope to counter the Dauntless-class threat? Kavarn placed a data crystal on the linkage platform before the Council. It glowed ruby red, automatic encryption active. These schematics contain a near-complete blueprint of the graviton projector array, including auxiliary power routing and emergency vent protocols. Our research teams estimate it will take at least 2 Androvian standard months to synthesize a prototype gravitic dispersal field. One of the analysts, a gaunt woman named Volina, projected a 3-dimensional grid of the Defiant's reactor chamber. Commander, she said, thumbs flying across her holo console. Our simulations show that by redirecting even a fraction of an Androvian ion flux generator through a pulse-dampening matrix, we can nullify or significantly weaken incoming graviton bursts. But the margin for error is razor-thin. Miscalibration could cause an implosion. Kavarn inclined his head. We're aware of the risks. Our best minds are working around the clock. In the interim, I propose we reinforce all frontline cruisers with electromagnetic dampeners and retrofit sensor arrays with subspace filtering to detect graviton pulses earlier. High Counselor Raven exchanged a somber look with Elder Inara. And what of the humans now? Do we wait for their next move or strike preemptively? Kavarn inhaled slowly, recalling the frantic corridors of the Defiant, the roiling core about to collapse, Sarah's last transmission, her voice breaking as she reported the reactor meltdown. Drawing strength from those memories, he answered, "We cannot be certain of their intentions, but I believe humanity will not hesitate to eliminate any Androvian presence they deem a threat. Our best course is to prepare defenses and extend an olive branch, offer diplomatic talks once we have the capability to defend ourselves. Peace forged at the point of a graviton cannon is preferable to being leveled from orbit." Silence settled, as the council weighed his words. Finally, Elder Inara leaned forward, her translucent form shimmering. "Very well. Commander Kavarn, you are hereby appointed the overseer of Project Sentinel, our initiative to develop defensive systems against graviton weaponry. Continue to coordinate with the engineering directorate and inform me personally of every breakthrough. You may rest and recover, briefly, but your work is far from done." Kavarn saluted. "Thank you, Elder Inara. I will not fail." 5 days later, Engineering Sector, Oberon Station. The humming of gravitic coils and the acrid tang of welding plasma filled the cavernous research wing. Rows of engineers, technicians, and scientists, most still red-eyed from sleepless nights, crowded around tables strewn with reactor cores, EM dampener prototypes, and hollow schematic pads. Kavarn, clad in a reinforced research uniform, a far cry from his crimson command tunic, strode among them. At his side, Volina, her features pale and drawn, held a data link device humming with real-time calculations. "Commander," she said, voice low, "we've tested the first pulse-dampening matrix against simulated graviton bursts. Results are promising. Our prototype attenuated 96% of the energy in short-range tests. But if we scale it for a capital ship..." She tapped the holopad, and a spectral visualization of a cruiser-sized generator appeared. "We'll need thrice the subspace capacitors and more robust superconducting conduits. That pushes projected field stability to the very edge of Androvian engineering." Kavarn studied the display. He'd anticipated these challenges. "Then we prioritize capacitor fabrication, divert resources from the Jala research facility. If necessary, temporarily, pause lithium-9 excavation on Tau Ceti 9, Valina's gaze flicked upward. "If we draw too much from Tau Ceti supplies, the miners will revolt. We need 20 new capacitor cores by next week, just for lab-scale tests." Kavarn pressed his lips together. "Then secure them anyway. You can. I'll handle the Miners' Council." With a curt nod, he turned and marched toward the maintenance lift, Valina trailing behind. As the lift doors slid open, he thought of Sarah, her face pale but resolute aboard the Defiant, and steeled himself for the negotiations he dreaded. 4 days later, Oberon Station, miners' barracks, a cacophony of raised voices and metallic clatter spilled into the narrow hallway. Miners dressed in soot-stained overalls banged makeshift tools against U-shaped wrenches, demanding higher pay and safer working hours. Please, Kavarn had heard countless times. But now their grievances included a new frustration: quotas being siphoned for an Androvian defensive project. Kavarn entered the largest makeshift assembly hall, its walls lined with hexagonal light cells that flickered ominously, revealing tunnels of dark rock behind them. Down the center lay barrels of subspace capacitors, each one polished and glowing faintly cyan. Miners pointed accusing fingers. "You call this defense?" bellowed Foreman Dren. "You take our capacitors, leave us nothing to power our drills, and tell us to work faster. Our families go hungry and we watch you feed machines." Kavarn stepped onto a raised platform, his left arm still in a brace but his bearing unwavering. "I understand your frustration," he began, voice firm but measured. "We need those capacitors to develop technology that can protect every Androvian, including every one of you. If humanity decides to strike first..." A loud, hissing interruption cut him off. Sparks flew as someone smashed a conduit. Lights flickered dangerously. Murmurs of "no more words" rippled through the crowd. Kavarn paused, glancing at a young miner clutching a plasma torch. He raised both hands, an Androvian gesture of peace. "I am not here to steal your livelihood. I have arranged for additional rations to be delivered to your families, and once we fabricate the gravitic dispersal fields, every capacitor you produce will be safeguarded by that shield. No human weapon can breach it." Foreman Dren narrowed his eyes. "And what guarantees do we have? Last month you promised faster shifts paid in credits. Instead we got layoffs." Kavarn's gaze hardened. "I will personally ensure that no miner leaves Oberon Station empty-handed. I will authorize emergency rations, increase pay by 30%, and allocate 2 mining bots to reduce risk in hazardous shafts." A tense moment passed as the miners exchanged glances. Then one by one they lowered their makeshift weapons. The crowd's roar subsided into resentful murmurs. Foreman Dren approached the platform and extended a meaty hand. "Fine. But Commander, Kavarn, if we see one more Androvian officer pass our station with more credits than our own families can eat, we'll torch this entire station." Kavarn took his hand and squeezed firmly. "Understood. Thank you." 2 weeks later, Oberon Station, Sentinel Research Lab, a massive 5-story dome of reinforced serosteel dominated the research wing, the Sentinel Lab. Inside, gravitic coils hummed at the threshold of instability, monitored by 44 console-E stations. Volina hovered over the main hologrid, which displayed a 3-dimensional outline of an Androvian dreadnought retrofitted with pulse-dampening arrays covering its entire hull. "Commander Kavarn," she called, eyes bright with exhilaration, "the final simulation is ready." She tapped a series of run codes. The holo shifted to show the human-class battleship Dauntless, now superimposed with Androvian shield emitters projected along its bows and dorsal plates. The holo glowed as a simulated graviton pulse struck. For an instant, violet tendrils flared against the shield matrix, then dissipated into a cascade of prismatic light. "See? Our prototype repels 2 full-strength graviton blasts, each attenuated by 82%, before capacitor reserves exhaust." Kavarn exhaled. "Not perfect, but good enough to give our fleets a fighting chance." He allowed himself a small nod. The months of sacrifice, the lives lost, the fears that had clawed at him, all funneled into this moment of hope. "Volina," continued, voice hushed with awe, "once we integrate these arrays into the Erebus-class carriers and the Phoenix-class cruisers, we can project a defensive umbrella over Androvian space. But full deployment will require another month at least." Kavarn closed his eyes briefly. "Understood." He turned, sweeping his gaze over the assembled researchers. "Every minute counts. Double shifts begin immediately. We cannot allow the humans another surprise." 3 days later, Oberon Station, Medical Bay. The corridor to the medical bay was brightly lit, a contrast to the dim halls of the engineering sector. Inside, the bay's sterile panels and the softly humming medbot stations offered a faint sense of calm. Kavarn paused at Lieutenant Sarah's bed, where her form lay motionless beneath a translucent drape. Half of her uniform had been replaced by healing sensors and nanite injectors. Her once alert eyes were closed, pale lines of dried saline tracing her cheeks. He swallowed hard. 2 days ago, the primary surgeon, Doc Malus, had delivered the worst news. Sarah's injuries, extensive gravitic burn damage to her right lung and tissue necrosis in her thigh, had left her on the precipice of organ failure. Only a full nanite transplant and experimental procedure could save her, but the success rate was barely 30%. Behind him, Doc Malus emerged, arms crossed. "Commander, I'm glad you came. She's stable for now. But the nanite cohort arrives tomorrow from Neovora Station. We'll perform the transplant at 0400 hours. Kavarn turned, jaw clenched. "Is that all we can do?" Malus nodded solemnly. "Androvian medical science has reached its limit. These nanites, they can replace damaged cells faster than her body can necrotize them. But if any gravitic residue lingers, He trailed off, fear in his eyes. Kavarn exhaled. Understood. Thank you, Doctor. He stepped to Sarah's side, placing a gloved hand gently on her forearm. Her skin felt cool under the touch. Leaning close, he whispered, Lieutenant Sarah, if you can hear me, remember the Defiance reactor. You saved all those engineers below. You made a difference. I need you back. Silence met his plea. Tears threatened the edges of his eyes, and he withdrew, leaving a single bright data shifter, an encrypted message he recorded. Sarah, your courage carried us when all hope seemed lost. Come back to us. He lingered until the lights dimmed on the bay doors, then left quietly. 2 days later, Oberon Station, Council Terrace. Kavarn joined Elder Inara on the terrace overlooking Tau Ceti's swirling orange-brown clouds. Below, mining, skiffs flitted between floating platforms. The station's domed habitat glowed softly behind them. The Tau Cetian wind, thin but perceptible, swept across the open deck. Inara's holoform flickered slightly as she turned. Commander, I trust you have news? He drew a breath. The nanite transplant is scheduled. The odds remain slim, but we hold hope. He let his gaze drift to the horizon. The Sentinel arrays shall be deployed to the Erebus flagship within 20 standard days. Once installed, our fleets can withstand a human graviton assault, at least temporarily. Inara nodded thoughtfully. That is a monumental achievement. Soon Androvia will no longer cower at rumors. We will stand. And your leadership? Her composure cracked. Your courage saved Oberon Station from potential annihilation. You have my admiration, and that of the entire council. He bowed his head. I did what was necessary. In their shared silence, the station's gravity generators played a dim aria, an unspoken reminder of the precarious balance between life and void. Kavarn's eyes narrowed as distant lights flickered beneath the cloud layer. Construction platforms, mining rigs, the sparks of industry forging Androvian destiny. What of Terra Accord's response, he asked. Our scouts report increased human patrols near the Jupiter corridor. Inara's eyebrows knit. They are probing. The humans sense weakness. When Sentinel is operational, we send an envoy to Earth to establish a formal ceasefire if possible. If diplomacy fails, we are prepared to defend every inch of Androvian space. Kavarn swallowed. Understood. Before he could speak further, a soft chime beckoned. An Androvian aide appeared, saluting. Commander Kavarn, Lieutenant Sarah's. Procedure has concluded. The Elder stepped aside. Go to her side, Commander. I will bid you both safe return. That night, Medical Bay, Oberon Station. Kavarn entered the medical bay to find Doc Malus leaning over Sarah's recovery unit. Her breathing, once shallow, now flowed in steady, rhythmic pulses. The nanites were working. Her pallid skin regained a faint blush of life. An array of hollows monitored her vitals. Heart rate steady at 80 beats per minute. Oxygen saturation nearing optimal levels. Malus looked up, exhaustion etched into his face. Her body has accepted the nanites. The gravitic necrosis has receded, and regeneration has begun. If no complications arise, she'll awaken tomorrow. Kavarn let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. Thank you, Doctor. He moved closer, taking Sarah's hand in his. Despite the bandages, he felt warmth returning to her fingertips. As he watched, Sarah's eyelids fluttered. Her brow furrowed, and she exhaled shakily. See, Commander? Her voice was a whisper, hoarse but unmistakably hers. Kavarn knelt beside her bed, eyes shining with relief. You're safe now, Lieutenant. You're going to be fine. Sarah's gaze cleared. For a moment she looked confused, as though waking from a dream. Then recognition sparked. Kavarn, you... Her hand clutched his. He squeezed gently. I'm here. A faint smile curved Sarah's lips. Then, we may stand a chance against them. Kavarn returned her smile, hope blossoming. In that moment, as the artificial lights of Oberon Station buffered them from the cold void beyond, He felt the fragile promise of a new dawn. Androvia would survive, not through fear, but through unity, science, and the unwavering spirit of those who dared to defy annihilation. High above, the stars of the Tau Ceti system glimmered unknowing. Somewhere out there, the Dauntless brooded in Earth's orbit, its weapons silenced for now, but its threat ever present. And yet, as Kavarn watched Sarah's chest rise and fall, he believed that this time, Androvia would not alone hope in darkness. They would walk into whatever came next, undaunted, prepared, and never again wishing they hadn't scanned a human battleship.